Why do I always started it like it's like a production of Fiddler on the Roof. Like
The big introduction, right? The big Technicolor, everything widens, and here
right?
we are.
Ah, another episode of the Bruce and Ron Show.
R&B back again.
R&B back again. Here it is, Bruce. You lovely, lovely man. How was your week?
Not bad, not bad. And we've been texting, obviously, always in touch on the whatever topic is going to be coming up and stuff. And I have to give you credit for reminding me about this one because we're finally getting around to an artist that we both have a lot of admiration for, and there should be less contention with this one. But the great Peter Gabriel, someone that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I'm very excited. I've been excited all week, and kind of boning up and revisiting a lot of stuff that I hadn't heard in a while. So very excited.
So I want to ask you out of the gate, like, do you feel like he's left out of a lot of conversations? Or do you feel like he's up there? Like, do you feel like he's like he gets his due props,
I think whenever he's back in the spotlight, I feel like, okay, people know, because I think people know how great he is. But he's always been someone that has straddled that line between being like a cult artist and then eventually achieving superstardom. And the other thing too is that he can sometimes be one of these artists that it's like long between actual studio albums. It can be like really, really long stretches of time. So you can kind of get lost in that mix, if you're not one of these artists constantly pounding your social media and always kind of staying out there and stuff. I get the feeling with him, he's got like this best of all worlds, and that he's very kind of introspective artist, maybe a little bit reclusive, gets to kind of do the big projects when he's ready to do them, and then kind of vanishes again, which is a great luxury.
And he has his own production company, so he can do that, right? Like he produces
studios
like
and all
music.
that. Yeah, he's well off. I mean, once this album broke big, he was set to be able to kind of do whatever he wanted. So he, he's in a good place. And the reason also to touch upon this and bring it up is another reason besides Ron reminding me is that Peter Gabriel is reemerging. We're talking about all this stuff. Even just today, like coincidentally, you and I are filming on the, another full moon day in 2023. And what Peter Gabriel is doing with his upcoming album is he's releasing these new tracks every full moon. And so unbeknownst, like I didn't even hit me today, and we just got a new one. A few I forgot how far back he released Panopticon, which is the first single, that we get to hear of new music. And then today we got The Crown.
It's awesome.
Was it The Crown, or I'm trying to remember what was
I can look it up.
The Court. I'm sorry, The Court.
Yeah, The Court.
Yeah. So we got that song out today, and we're going to be having, Peter Gabriel tour coming up, later this year, and they have yet to announce as far as what the tour dates will be for the States. But I'll be very excited too, because this will be the first chance not the first chance I've had, but I'm going to be determined to actually see him. He's one of those artists still left on my bucket list of people that I haven't seen. So,
well, I mean, and those stage shows, I mean, the guy's a performance artist, right? Like I have this image of from his Genesis days, like videos that I've seen of him with like the masks and like, right? Like he wore like animal masks. I mean, the guy's a performance artist, like all the way going into like so many, like the So concerts and stuff. I mean, I just love him as a stage performer.
Yeah, he again, like you were talking about watching documentaries and how quiet and kind of withheld it is, he's not one of these like, super charismatic in terms of like interviewees and stuff like that. But a lot of his artistry just does show on the stage, and he puts a lot of thought, even dating back to, when Genesis were finally starting to kind of gain some traction, and we'll get into all that as well. But that's, I think, a key part of him.
I was saying to you before we got on the call that like, like I feel bad because the guy is so impressive, right? What the integration of world music into rock and all the albums he's produced for other people, as well as his own work, and just how cinematic it is, and how many movies it's in, right? And I'm like, I wanted to watch a bunch of documentaries, and I got like, he's so soft-spoken and so grounded, and it's awesome. Like I bet he's a great guy to hang with, but I was like, I had such a hard time watching the documentaries. I was like, wake up, wake up, wake up, and he's so fascinating.
Well, and he doesn't have like and if he does, we certainly don't know about it, but he doesn't have like one of these super dramatic arts in terms of like, made a public spectacle of himself or anything like that,
And maybe
So
that's part of it too, is that like
yeah,
he doesn't embody that lifestyle, like that rock star icon legend, you know?
yeah, there's something very cerebral throughout all his work. I mean, even in his description of what the panopticon concept was, I mean, you go on the website and read it, and it's like it's very kind of a highfalutin thing. But thankfully, like none of that seems to matter because he also has the gift of being able to translate that stuff. And whether you care about what the concepts are or not, he's able to turn it into accessible music at this stage, you know, and a good tune.
Accessibility would be you know, it's funny enough, like I was like, that's the biggest word that stuck with me is like, I'm obsessed with his voice. I've been obsessed with his voice for years. Like that ground, like the gravelly, throaty baritone. That's
Mm-hmm.
again, whereas like if you, Freddie Mercury, I always bring up as like, he's my just absolute favorite rock singer ever, right? Like where baritone, high baritone can sing like a tenor, sing super high into the stratosphere, totally like anthem rock. Whereas Peter Gabriel is like the most accessible voice. It's not untouchable. You're like, I could do that. I could do that. I mean, like you can't, but like it's so grounded, right? And just the way he moves up and down the scale is effortless. And like you and I talked about before, like his falsetto, like just jumping in, like he has the low grounded part, and then but it's, I mean, it's a very skilled instrument, but it's like it sounds accessible. It sounds like, oh yeah, that's how he talks probably. And it's not.
Yeah, it sounds accessible until you try it.
Yeah, man. I told you I've been practicing In Your Eyes. I thought it'd be a fun. I do a lot of cover songs in my comedy show, and like I thought In Your Eyes would be like what like an ideal song because I'm doing a Valentine's Day show in a few weeks, and that's like to me like, you know, like the scene from Say Anything with John
Mhm.
Cusack and
But
then
yeah, an
right the boombox.
80s, like, you know, you talk about an iconic 80s image. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, the kind of get, and he's got the trench coat, and he looks so
Mhm.
sad. Um, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna play that, but it's so vocally challenging. And I have the notes, but it's just like the flipping into the head voice, the going from the low to the high. I mean, phenomenal. It's not easy. And then I was like, let's add some throatiness. Nope. Like that's his voice. His voice is that
Yeah,
30, and it doesn't
bit of a
quite
tour de
hurt.
force on that one for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So Bruce, take us to the top. Okay, so Genesis. I know you're also a huge Phil Collins fan too, and I know they had supposedly a riff, but not really. They collaborated on albums. So
Yeah, you know, like Phil and Peter to this day are friends, you know, and I don't think there was ever like a clash with them, you know, like people would have assumed like there was a usurpment of, you know, Peter
yeah.
Gabriel. But the real issue, I mean, you know, they start off as kind of, you know, English schoolboys and start a band, and you know, Tony Banks, the great keyboard player, and Peter. I think what really started to be the issue was when we're talking about Gabriel's theatricality. You know, they kind of
Mhm.
started as a band of, and you know, it was a band where it was everyone was pretty creative and all, you know, songwriters, so all contributing. You know, and this is like the era of progressive rock. You know, and this Genesis, the first phase of Genesis, obviously falls into that. You know, some virtuosic playing, longer pieces, kind of off kilter topics, time signatures, and all the, you know, the classic stuff that goes along with it. But you know, Gabriel started introducing the theatrical elements in, and you know, at first it was like, oh, you know, I think he didn't even introduce that he was gonna kind of wear the dress, you know, that was on the cover of one of the albums. I forget which one, but you know, comes out in it, and what happens is like the English media, in particular the rock press, latch onto that, you know, and that kind of makes cover of all the music weeklies and stuff. And so they started actually getting press, you know, front page press, and they were able to double their booking fees. So none of the band minded that. But what happens is that over time, a lot of the attention started going to Peter as the front man, and you know, wearing the bulbous costume and you know, all these different things that he was, you know, bringing to the forefront. Um, and in particular, when I think of like the personality clashes, I think the ones that I've read about the most were like between Peter and Tony Banks, a keyboard player, you know, having artistic disagreements and things like that. So by the time they get to the Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, which is their big magnum opus concept album, you know, with the run of that tour, you know, Peter essentially is kind of done with the whole thing, and you know, some domestic things it's trying to take care of as well, and you know, band's not appreciative of that. So you know, that's when he kind of starts to break free and launch into his solo career.
which is and like he hits the ground running though, right? Like they're not like huge, like colossal successes, but they're pretty successful, right? Was it 1, 2, and 3?
Yeah, I'll show them off in a bit. So yeah, you have Peter going one direction, then you got Genesis, and eventually, like, you know, Phil, who's their drummer, they go through an audition, allegedly like 400 singers or whatever that they go through to try to find a singer. And Phil would be kind of guiding the singer, teaching him along, and eventually they kind of go, "Well, you're singing this stuff better than any of these people." So Phil takes over, and then that starts moving in a more. They start trimming down the excesses and becoming more of a pop hit making machine. And of course, the rest is history with that. It's interesting because later they sort of hit a commercial peak around the same time as this album, so they're back in the spotlight and kind of, you know, in a kind of competing context. But yeah, I mean, from the beginning, you know, Gabriel starts establishing more of a kind of a strong cult career, cult artist. So like all the first 4 albums are all named Peter Gabriel. Kind of sees them all as a body of work. So they were all just you know, just the name on the front. Eventually, you know, fans would call him Peter Gabriel 1, 2, 3, and 4, but they don't really have any titles. And they would also, like, fans would name them by the cover. So I'll show them off a little bit here. So he got this first one, and this one, you know, because he's sitting in a car, you know, it got titled Car, right? So that's Peter Gabriel 1. And then you get this one, which is another classic one, the scratch cover. And so this one gets known as Scratch. This one, which I think was like the early breakthrough and the sign of things to come. This had Biko on it. Games Without Frontiers was the third one, Peter Gabriel, with the Melt cover. So this one became known as Melt. And then you had this fourth one, Peter Gabriel, and this one, the American label, it was, you know, they labeled it Security, which is against Peter's wishes. But there was that slowly, you know, if you're paying attention to the albums, he's, you know, you got the first early singles, Salisbury Hill, you know, the third album, like we said, Games Without Frontiers. The third one, I feel, is where he's starting to find a little bit of the sonic signatures, you know, especially like him and Phil did a little collaboration on a drum sound. So it was like the early, this idea of like no cymbals on the record to kind of clutter up the drum sound. You know, Peter early on in his career was like a drummer in his first few bands. So he to this day still thinks in terms of rhythms. So in that album, you know, it was really kind of working that piece of it out. But it's also the beginning of that pioneering that 80s gated drum sound that Phil would really, you know, take to the nth degree with In the Air Tonight. And then pretty much every 80s record after that stole that sound, you know. But everything's building. And at the same time, again, he's one of these artists where the timing was impeccable because we have the advent of MTV. And Peter being a visual artist as much as, you know, sonic artist, latched onto that. And so you have
Sledgehammer. I mean, it's just like, that's so iconic. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even earlier videos than that, like my introduction being a sort of 80s teen, you know, Peter Gabriel was through the MTV videos, you know, Games Without Frontiers, very creepy video. Shock the Monkey was, you know, very visually arresting. You know, you see his look in that and like the paranoia of it, you know, and
but the music lends itself, like
know,
it just lends itself to cinema. It lends itself to the visual medium, you know, like whenever, even the later stuff, right? Like we talked about the darkness, the light, and the whimsy, right? And you're saying like so much of that is influenced by MTV.
Yeah, well, you know, he's taking advantage of that tool because, you know, as a solo artist, you know, that's there as a thing, and he rode that wave. So he was like an early adapter of, you know, kind of making those videos, and then, you know, all of this stuff, all the work sonically and then visually, you know, it's all sort of building. And as you said, cinematic quality, all these things ultimately build up to, you know, his masterpiece, you know, So, you know, the So album. And, you know, to me, I think it's still like if you want to give the best representation, the best version of the 80s sonic palette, listen to that album, because even though it has the technology, it has the modern sounds, then to me, to my ears, it's like sleek as a Ferrari, and it's the best because it's the most tastefully handled production, 80s production. So it's aged the best as a result for me. And this was the album with like all these the blockbuster tracks, of course, Sledgehammer, your favorite, In Your Eyes, great album tracks like Red Rain, the song Big Time, you know, another like a Tony Levin showcase, you know, on bass. Just a beautiful, beautiful album. And I think we were talking before the recording too, is that for me, Peter is an artist that is like that perfect balance between darkness and light in all his work, because there is an undercurrent of darkness sonically, thematically in there. And then there's lightness, you know, there's hope, you know, and a song like Don't Give Up with the great Kate Bush testing on it. I mean, amazing song, amazing message. You know,
and it's not cheesy. Like Don't Give Up, I was marveling at how cheesy that song could be. That song could have been a musical theater song, and it's not.
In the wrong hands, that could have been like, you know, a horror show.
Yeah.
You know, it could have been so maudlin, it could have been whatever. And just again with this kind of the sparse sonic touches and just what Kate brings to, I mean, a lot of credit has to be given to her.
Yeah.
Although, you know who his first choice for that was?
Who?
You're not going to believe this when I tell you.
Brightman? Like who? Like
he was a big fan, still is, of Dolly Parton.
Oh, dude, I saw a documentary about her recently. I'm a fan. I respect the hell out of her. She can rock. I would have got. She's a badass. Like,
yeah, but when you try to picture that, it's like, you know, even I think the producer on the album was like, you know, looking back, it's like I couldn't see it, you know, especially now, obviously that Kate sang it and owns it. Yeah. It's hard to imagine, but
especially
apparently
85, especially like 84, 85, right? Because it comes out in 86. Like that Dolly Parton, like that, she wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah, that apparently, you know, they reached out and she wasn't interested because I guess he wasn't a well-known enough artist that she knew. So she, you know, she passed on it. You know, I wonder what she thinks of that now if they ask her. But
right, if she's ever done a cover.
But that's a very interesting footnote for that.
That's really funny. So check this out. So then so this comes out 86, right? And this is where and it's so funny. It's like that. You're absolutely right. Like musically, it's just canonized. Like it's solidified in this time capsule of like the apex of 80s music and 80s rock, right? Without being annoying, without being cheesy over the top. Mm-hmm. For me, he is commemorated for this. Like this album commemorates him because it's in so many movies, so many soundtracks. After this, though, he has a phenomenal career, right? Like he's producing world albums, he's touring. Like tell me, what does it look like after?
Yeah, I mean, the tours get more and more elaborate. The follow up to this, Us, it was a more introspective album, but I thought it was really, really strong. You know, I mean, it had some hits on it, Steam, some big tracks like Blood of Eden, with Sinead O'Connor sang on that, and Come Talk to Me.
Come Talk to Me is great.
One of my favorite tracks called 14 Black Paintings, which is just kind of, you know, again, like kind of a world music sonic thing, very sparse, and then him just like, you know, vocalizing but not lyrically over it. Just a very, it could easily have been like a soundtrack piece on the Passion soundtrack, which he did for Last Temptation of Christ.
Yeah,
another great piece of work. So he's doing interesting work beyond that. But as far as like between the studio albums, you're getting its longer stretches, because I think Us came out in 92. I mean, when you think about finally breaking in with a big album in 86, you would think that, you know, your first thing would be, get another one right away, you know, we get those long stretches. But you know, he's his own artist, his own man, and obviously, you know, after this album, he had all kinds of leverage and stuff. So, but no, continues to have a great career. Has, you know, done orchestral versions of his albums, there's been cover versions and all this stuff. And you know, like we were talking about, the stage presentation, you know, got more and more arresting, and he really honed the art of that. You know, I was just watching the DVD of Back to Front, which was when he actually went back on the road. I still can't believe I missed this show. And part of the show was they revisited the Soul album in its entirety.
Wow.
But even the way he structured the show is very artistic, because he starts the song with just him and Tony Levin, and he's just playing the piano. And it's a song that's in progress. He doesn't even have the full lyrics. And he says, basically, what I'm going to be doing as I'm performing the song is trying to search for the lyrics of the song. So I'm going to take you through what the process is like. So you get that. Then it's like a brief acoustic section. You know, they do acoustic versions of some of the songs. Then there's an electric version. And then you get like what he calls the dessert, which was the So album, you know. So,
you know,
yeah, I mean, very creative.
Like, you know, you see a lot of the shit, like the stuff where like, even was the one where he's in like a bubble.
Oh yeah. I know that that DVD I remember was the Growing Up concert. Yes.
So, you know, it's like, it's hard not to, in my head, compare the stage shows to like a David Byrne, right? Like, but, and I love David Byrne, I love his voice too. But like, God, like Peter Gabriel just does it on a whole other level, because the music, again, with the music is just as creative, is just as artistic, just as poignant and textured, layered, dynamic, gut-wrenching at times, right? But so accessible because of that whimsy. There's always like this playful animation to it. Like I can, no matter what the song is, I can hear it in my mind. Like I mean, I see it. Not I obviously can hear it. I mean, I can see it. I can see the colors and the templates, and you know, it's like I think Bowie does that really well, obviously. Like, you know, but it's like God, like it's this perfect like zenith of all of these different ideas and all these different other like musical things that are going on at the time, and he just does it on such a high level.
And you know, it speaks a lot to, like, you know, as an artist, the more you can broaden your palette and like get other influences in, it's only going to inform your work. Because obviously with the world music influence and those kinds of things, those elements show up all throughout, you know, his albums, especially from like Peter Gabriel 3 onward. You have those sort of beats in there, and you know, he starts the WOMAD Music Festival, so it's a world music festival. So he's been a champion of that, you know, his Real World, I think, label, a lot of that, championing those kinds of artists. So he's always plugging those kinds of things. So all of that stuff, again, becomes part of that sonic palette. He's working with great producers like Brian Eno, Daniel Lanois, who's another guy who's very big on soundscapes and shaping, you know, shaping an album, you know, sonically. So he worked with the right people, assembled the right team. Great musicians, you know, even up to this day, we're getting, you know, because the album that's supposed to come out is called I.O. So a lot of stuff he's done since he had to actually put titles on the albums, or decided to, he still wanted to just keep it very simple so that the graphic is clean. So you had So, then you had Us, eventually you had Up, and then this new one's called I.O., which is interesting. So you just kind of have the two letters, you know, but it also can imply a lot too in the meaning. But with these two new tracks that have dropped, you know, the first one being Panopticon, and then The Court, which just dropped today. I love it because to me, it's like, wow, this is really hearkening back to sonically like the 80s, early mid 80s kind of Peter Gabriel sound. I don't know if you heard that in it as well.
I didn't get a chance to listen to Court yet. You sent it today, and I get a chance. But what I'm finding it to that point is like, he's such a good example of having a stamp, right? Having a sonic stamp, like being like, he knows his bass, like he knows his structure, he knows what, like his brand essentially, right? Yeah. And yet every song is different, every album is different. Like but it's still a Peter Gabriel sound, right? Like he knows exactly like backwards and forwards what his fans want, I think, and yet he gives it flair with like different world music, world harmonics, world instruments that we're not necessarily used to, but it's still a fucking Peter Gabriel song. Like I love that. I love the consistency of that, you know, and it works. With other people, you're like, oh, okay, it's another Taika Waititi movie.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, like that to me is like the worst example. Like it's too much Taika Waititi. Like, and you give Taika Waititi too much to do on his own, and it's like, oh, and you get like this last Thor movie. Like, I don't know, what was it? Thor: Love and Thunder. There was no love, there was no thunder in this movie. Like, so whereas like he is just like, he knows his lane, and yet he knows how to give it a different flair, but a different more than flair and more different layers, textures, but God, it's like so consistent. I just love it. I love it from a and I think taking your time to produce albums that's what it does. You know, you're not just banging them out.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we like if we talk about like Leonard Cohen, I mean, that's someone like in terms of writing songs, he would also like write 100 and something verses before he got the one he wanted. So he was also he would by his own words would say he's not particularly prolific. But when you got a Leonard Cohen album, it felt complete. It didn't feel half-assed. It didn't feel like it was cluttered with filler. It felt like this is the album. And I feel like with Peter Gabriel's albums, being in the kind of place he's at, able to do it this way, he works at his pace. But then when you finally get the product,
Yeah.
that's the finished work, you know. And like you said, you talk about consistency. What I like is that he's not someone who's like completely reinvented his sound. Like
Yeah.
it shifted on his first albums as he's trying to find his individual voice. But once he really finds it, I feel like all these albums from like 3 on, you know, they share a certain sonic palette. And so he's not someone who's like with trends trying to chase after trends. He stayed firm. And yet, again, maybe because of the quality of the songs, they still work, you know. It's, in fact, listening to like the latest 2 songs, I'm like, it almost feels like with what modern production is going, it almost has caught up with some of his ideas to where he sounds fresh, which is the beauty of also when you step away for a while, you come back and it's like, yes, the Peter Gabriel sound is like, oh, this sounds fresh again, you know. And that's how I felt about the songs.
Yeah. 100%. I have like nothing to add. I'm like, yeah, no, that's right. Like,
yeah, no, I mean, your insights, the thing is, as a singer, and that's what, you know, it's what I like to hear about, you know, because you, from that perspective, what you hear in his work is also very interesting.
I get obsessive when I listen to any of his songs where I'm just like if I had to describe his voice, I get like, and again, it's like such a simple, like, I'm like, it's so light and airy, and yet it's deep. Like, I feel like I say this all the time, but like, if I could have anyone's voice, you know, I feel I always go back to like David Cassidy or him, like,
yeah,
in my head, like, because
it's quite the range there, yeah.
But they're both similar though. If you think like in certain aspects, right? They have these like David Cassidy's not gravelly, but they're both lower voices. They're both lower rock voices that are so rich and complex and like all encompassing. Like I feel like I'm swept into their voice. You know, with him, it's just like the like if I was like if you're born with that voice, like how are you not going to be a singer? You know, like it's so engaging and so heartfelt. And I feel like it could, especially with the live albums, like it could crack at any time, but it doesn't. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't.
And it's just the emotion too. It just, he really can get across an emotion.
Yeah,
you know,
and he's committed.
Yeah,
I'm like doting on it. I'm like I'm such a fanboy about his voice. Like, yeah,
and I guess if we're talking about it and a unifying element in the albums, you know, as long as you have that as a top line, you know, how are you going to go wrong with that, you know? But then the fact that he's so clever about song construction and rhythms, you know, time signatures, you know, varying things just enough, and yet still like tackling these heady subjects. And there's humor, which we haven't touched upon too, but there's humor, particularly in the videos, you know.
Yeah.
There's the cheeky kind of, you know, a humor element in those as well. So it's not like that it's completely self-serious, you know. I wouldn't describe it, you know, this, I don't, even though he deals with pretty weighty themes, I've never felt like he veered off into that pretentious era. It's just, it kind of keeps it reeled in, you know.
You said modeling. You said modeling, and that's like the best. He's not modeling. He's not like, I'm so happy being upset, you know. Like he's not that. Like he's not just sitting in the field. Like again, it sounds like a guy who's gotten a hard shake. Like he's gotten like some stuff has happened to him in a world that's colorful and complex, and like I keep saying complex, but it's like there's so much going on instrumentally, right?
Mm-hmm.
That like it contrasts his dark, kind of grounded, gravelly voice. It's airy and light over here, and he's like, again, there's aspects of airy and light to him, but it's more like gravelly and I'm trying to think of like the hues are darker and lower, but the passionate orchestrations just like sit so well with it. It's just, yeah, man, I'm such a fan. Like that to me is worth listening. And then you add to it a great stage performance. I'm like, sorry, Bruce, he's one of the greatest. Let's say just performers, one of the greatest of all time. As much as I love Daltrey, like I get where Daltrey is a great performer, but like I'm good like after a few songs of like a solo Daltrey show.
Yeah.
Or like I get it. Like, it's cool. It's awesome. I love Dolce, but like him, like a whole concert of him, you're like, what's next?
Yeah, it's a beautiful presentation. Really, so he's also very smart because he just knows how to surround himself with, you know, the
Yeah.
right presentation, the right talent. You know, he's had, you know, the kind of steady stable of musicians. And then you have, you know, again, I have to give top marks to Tony Levin because that bass sound
Oh, the bass
is
is
a
inherent.
signature, you know, especially when you watch it live presentation. So when you've got Peter Gabriel as your top line and then Tony Levin as the bottom, you could put anything in between that and have it work. You know, the fact that it's handled so elegantly is like a bonus. But I mean, those two elements alone, and then you add Manu Katché on drums, and you know David Sanchez on guitar, and just I mean, like really great players. It's wonderful, and I can't wait to see him. And you know, I would recommend for you, if because I don't
Yeah.
think you've ever seen him live, is to
No.
make that effort to actually go and catch this show.
Yeah.
Because
It's
you know,
worth it.
how much longer will we get that opportunity at this stage too? He's one of our veteran artists that, you know, we got to kind of still cling to while he's with us, and still producing great work too. Unlike a lot of his contemporaries, producing great new work, not just living off the past. So that's another area where he gets bonus points, major bonus points.
And I want to clarify about my Dolce comment. Like the reason I say that is because too, like as you're talking more and more about like again the nuance and but there's so much variation in tone and emotions with him. Whereas again, Dolce is very just like rah, you know. So for
Mm-hmm.
him to watch a stage show, it's just you're drawn in and there's so much happening. So yeah, so
Moods,
moods,
various moods. You're getting different
cues,
moods. You're getting taken on an emotional journey with
yeah.
those songs. Yeah, he can, you know, it can be light and fun and silly. It can be something playful where people can dance along to, like Sledgehammer and
Mhm.
Steam. Something like Biko that's really deep and dark, and you think about it and stuff. So he's an amazing artist. I think because again, probably being the artist that he is, you
Yeah.
know, like you said, he's not always in the conversation of like greats because he's again not out there making a spectacle of himself in terms of publicly. But yeah, I'm glad we're finally getting able to give him this nod, this well deserved nod.
100%. Is there anything else you want to add to this?
No, just again, you know, for people, you
Yeah.
know, who are old school fans but maybe have not heard the new songs, you know, it's well worth checking out. Panopticon and The Court, both great songs, especially if you love his kind of early mid '80s period. I think it bodes well for the album that's going to come out. I think we're going to get some great new work from him, and the show. I'm sure he's not treading backwards, so I'm sure that presentation is going to be bigger and better
Epic.
and very very arresting as always. So I look forward to that.
Hell yeah, man. 100%. So thank you again for watching another episode of the R&B Show.
Yes, please like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. And Ron and I will be back. And Ron, why don't you tell me what was the album that we were talking about recently?
Oh, yeah, I'm excited for this one. We're gonna talk about Pat Benatar. I'm just kidding. We really should talk about Pat Benatar. We, no, we're gonna be talking about LA Woman. Fuck, like LA. I've already started brushing up on my Doors again. I used to be obsessed with the Doors, back in the day. So yeah, LA Woman. We're gonna talk about is it that one? We're gonna
Overrated or not? Yeah, overrated
overrated
or
or
not.
not. Bringing back the
Be part of
series.
our overrated or not series. And this is a particular period of the Doors that it might be one of my favorite eras of the Doors, even though it's kind of got obviously Morrison way down. We'll get into all that history and stuff as well. But this is going to be a very interesting period, an interesting album to get into. And I think it'll be a great debate to have because I know you're a very passionate Doors fan, and particularly Jim Morrison as a singer. So,
Oh, huge fan. So, all right, well, stay tuned and keep watching Bruce's stuff. He's brilliant. Again, I would say it's like having like a rock encyclopedia as your friend. You're just like, what do you think about this? You know, and then he is like so knowledgeable. So thank you, Bruce, for your wisdom and your genius. I'm a big fan, and I'll see you guys next week or next time. It's not, it's the internet. It's whenever. I'll see you next time.
all right, take care, Ron. Likewise, take care, bud.
Holla.